Well, g'day. This is probably the most anticipated video I've uploaded, and it is the video about using the Skew chisel. I promised you that I would upload this video once I got to 1,000 subscribers, and I did get to those 1,000 subscribers, and I actually didn't have the video made, so I couldn't just straight away upload it. In fact, the 1,000 subscribers crept up on me very quickly. And there's a very good reason for that, which I won't go into now. I'll go into that in another video. But here it is, the long-awaited video on how to use a Skew chisel, demystifying the Skew chisel and its use. It really is, once you understand a couple of really basic principles, quite an easy tool to use and a wonderful tool to have in your wood-turning arsenal. Wonderful tool. So I think it's not a matter of, and this is what I hope to cover with this video, it's not a matter just of knowing what to do, but also what not to do. I think that's really important, because if you can understand the things that you need to avoid, well, you can avoid them, and you can avoid the accidents, you can avoid the mishaps, you can avoid the catches or the timber flying across the room or whatever. So that's what I hope to cover sufficiently in this video. So let's go. Using the Skew, made easy, I hope. Remember that the Skew chisel is in fact a cutting tool, and as opposed to a scraper. Now, a cutting tool cuts when the bevel rubs, and I'm just going to do this by hand. The bevel rubs, rubbing, and you bring or you adjust the handle so that the cutting edge comes into action, and we are slicing the timber off like so. So that's a cutting action. And as I said, the Skew chisel is a cutting tool. Okay, now let's turn the lathe on, and we'll do that with the lathe running. Now I've got the lathe running flat chat. It's running at about 3,000 RPM. Okay, so bevel rubbing, nothing is happening. I'm going to adjust the handle. In this case, I'm going to lift it towards me a little bit so that we do cut. And there it is, cutting. So bevel rubbing, lift the handle up a little bit in this case, or adjust it, the handle position, so that the cutting edge comes into action. Now the next point is that cutting edge here needs to make an angle with the rotation of the wood of about 45 degrees. Now let's have a look at the rotation of the wood. Now the rotation of the wood is easily indicated by a line like so. I'm going to turn the lathe off. That's the rotation of the wood. There is the cutting edge here. Now that angle that it makes is about 45 degrees. Now let's not get hung up about whether it is exactly 45 degrees or not, but let's just say it's approximately 45 degrees. So that angle in there is approximately 45 degrees. Now that's an important thing to remember with any cutting tool on the lathe. So here we have it. It's approximately 45 degrees to the rotation. Now it doesn't matter whether I'm cutting that way or coming back this way. This way is a lot more awkward because I've got my body in the way. But once again, where's my pencil gone? That's the cutting edge there, and there's the angle of rotation there. It's about 45 degrees, approximately 45 degrees. Now, if you go more or less than 45 degrees, that means you're doing this sort of thing. Instead of cutting at about 45, less than 45 is like that. Okay, there's less than 45, less than 45. Now, if you go less than 45, really, there's no danger. What is happening, however, is that the tool is just becoming less effective. So we open it up to about 45 degrees. Now the dangers are when you increase the angle. So you go around here like so. Now I'm going to slow the lathe down. I'm going to slow the lathe down to show you what's going to happen with this. Now basically, what happens when we come to open up the angle, so we go in more than 45 degrees, is that suddenly, and I'll turn the lathe off for a sec, suddenly what is happening is, instead of cutting in a slicing action, that is, the wood hits the cutting edge and slices down that cutting edge. What we're doing as we're doing this more and more and more, we're introducing more of the cutting edge to the wood all at once. Now for me to hold that there like so is really hard to do. I can hold the lathe and turn the lathe by hand, that is, when the cutting edge is at about 45 degrees, but as soon as I open that angle up, the more I get to 90 degrees, I find it really hard to hold because I am cutting over such a big area all at once, like that. Turn the lathe on. Now that's the danger there. In other words, there wasn't much of a danger. The only thing that happened really was that we made a lot of noise. The timber started to vibrate, and the reason for that is because the piece of timber is held solidly, nicely between two centres, and it's not going to get away from me. But if that piece of wood was well, let's say it was half that length, if it was only being held by one end by a chuck, and you try to do that, then that sort of cut is what I'm getting at, then what would happen would be the wood goes flying off the lathe, comes out of the jaw. In other words, the reason there is a problem there's a danger of that, is because you are just trying to take off too much wood all at once. And it puts a lot of force onto whatever's holding the timber on the lathe. Now if it is a chuck, it's putting an awful lot of force on the jaws. That is what's holding the timber on the lathe. Or it's putting a lot of force on the operator, that is the turner. And what can happen, what sometimes it happens is, and this is what we call a catch, is that the back of the tool, or the back of the handle, lifts up quickly. And we have that, what we call a catch going on. And it's simply because there's too much force being applied and something gives. Either the tool gives, the operator can't hold onto the tool hard enough, or the wood gives, it comes out, or the wood vibrates and chatters, and we get this really rough cut. So, simply summing that up, 45 degrees. Now you will also notice, look carefully, where the wood is coming off. I'll speed the lathe up. There's no drama in going quickly, so don't be scared of the lathe going fast. In fact, it's so much easier to operate quickly. And what you'll notice is that the shavings are coming off the skew chisel cutting edge below halfway. Have a look. Now, why are we doing that? Why is all that always recommended? Well, the reason is because, well, I can cut above halfway. There it is there. But you are getting closer and closer to the point where something might go wrong. And what might go wrong is this point jags into the timber. And I'll do that at slow speed, but that's the reason why it's always said cut below centre. Now if that happens, that's what happens. We can turn the lathe off and we can see that we've just jagged that tip right into the wood. And that's an outcome we don't want, obviously. So that's why it is recommended that you cut below halfway. Now I've got a different piece of wood in the lathe here. This is a piece of camphor laurel, and it is, it's not a hard timber, but it's certainly not running true. Now you might have seen this sort of thing happen. Now this is called a peeling cut. It's basically the skew chisel used like a parting tool. I'm going to turn the lathe up. Now, the danger of this, the reason people suggest that this isn't a great practice, is because you can take big splinters off. But what you will notice I'm doing is a couple of things. I'm taking cuts are about half an inch at a time, nothing bigger than that. Now the other thing I'm doing is I'm dropping the handle as rubbing the bevel. There's the bevel rubbing. And to make it cut, I'm lifting the handle up. That's all I'm doing, I'm lifting the handle up. I'm not pushing the skew chisel into the wood, I'm just lifting the handle up like this. So bevel rubbing, lift the handle up. Bevel rubbing, lift the handle up. That's called a peeling cut.
Now you're lifting the handle up simply to keep the bevel rubbing. Now, a lot of people will use a skew chisel. I'm going to get the tourist a bit closer here. A lot of people will are trained to use a skew chisel like this. That's a traditional way. What's wrong with using it like this? Well, there is something wrong, but not desperately wrong. And the thing is that, and this is the point I want to make, is that really it doesn't matter whether you got the toe down or the heel down, because basically what you're doing is you're presenting that cutting edge at 45 degrees to our rotation. It doesn't matter whether you've got the toe down or with the heel down, it's still 45 degrees to that rotation. But there is a problem with this, with doing the toe down, and the problem basically is that my fulcrum point is here, my cutting is over here, and they're not in line. And so there tends to be a bit of this twisting, or this, a twisting motion. Now, and it's particularly grabby the higher up you start cutting. And that's the reason that's not recommended, or not a recommended way to cut with the skew chisel. However, I quite like cutting with that.